Okay, today we're going to be talking about supplier safety policies or their worker safety. Implement, monitor, and promote organizational and supplier safety policies and procedures. So we got a couple of rules of thumb here. Rule of thumb 1 for safety. Everyone should be able to grow old enough with all their appendages intact to be a problem to their children. And rule number 2 for safety. If it looks dangerous, 9 times out of 10, it probably is. So, laws and regulations. Buyers must be able to address the issue of compliance with environmental health and safety laws in the country where they work and in each country in which they conduct business. So you have to, if you're going to conduct business in Europe, you have to comply with European laws. So in the US, you've got the Occupational Safety and Health Act, OSHA Act from 1970, which establishes workplace safety standards, provides rules for conducting investigations of accidents, has record-keeping requirements, and requires research on safety in the workplace issues. Before this act, there really wasn't anything. When they were building the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco in the early 1930s, they had what was called the vulture line, because these guys were working on this high bridge without any ropes or safety harnesses, and they would fall off. And the vulture line was the next guy in line that could take that job. So states have also enacted their own version of OSHA. So there's a federal OSHA and there's state OSHA. Include compliance with the law, clause, and contracts. We do this paragraph 17 of our T's and C's. And OSHA carries both criminal and civil penalties for managers when there are violations. So if somebody dies on the job, the manager can have a criminal penalty brought against them if they're negligent. The legal trend is to hold third parties, which are buyers, which are, purchasing folks, accountable when they knew about violations but did nothing about it. So if you know about violations that are unsafe at your supplier and you don't do anything about it, you can be held accountable. Occupational Safety and Health Administration is part of the U.S. Department of Labor. And the WHO, the World Health Organization, a division of the United Nations, also has a universal precautions protocol. Personal liability, taking a person on a plant tour through a dangerous or unauthorized area, the corporate indemnity may not protect you if that person gets hurt. Organizational liability laws in many countries require the employer to ensure safety in the workplace. So you can be prosecuted with both criminal and civil charges if you don't do it. And the Department of Transportation is responsible for regulations concerning safety in air and transportation on air, water, and ground. Most other countries have an equivalent to the Department of Transportation. And industrial labor standards, some codes of practice from the organization. Occupation Safe and Healthy Convention 81 provided for adoption of a national occupation and safety health policy and promotes framework for a convention, promotes a preventative safety and health culture. In Europe, you've got the restriction of hazardous substances, which places restrictions on hazardous substances and electronic equipment. Also includes medical devices. Registration, evaluation, authorization, and restriction of chemical substances, which is EU, which is REACH. It's regulation of chemicals. And you have to produce a page saying what's in it. It's much like our SDS. And waste, and the WE, which is an EU directive which sets collection and recycling and recovery targets for electrical goods. Policies and procedures, employee safety. There's training requirements on things like personal protection, fire drills, etc. Buyers should require suppliers to provide certification of their safety training. Personal protective equipment, otherwise known as PPE. Company must provide things like helmets, goggles, masks. the safety data sheets. This used to be the MSDS, and now it's just the material safety data sheets. Now it's just called the safety data sheet. Must be on file for toxic materials, must be posted where the employees are working, got to list safety precautions, and is provided by the supplier of the material. So my buying organization doesn't write these, the supplier of the material has to provide them. Work environment safety guidelines for ensuring a safe work environment include the following: proper uniforms, critical for the professions that need to get protective gear, such as construction or welders. Designate proper emergency exits. So you have to have directions to them. You got to be clearly marked. Open discussions, ensure time for discussions on safety rules, promote health codes, display health codes in relevant areas, and proofing the building. Inspect the building regularly to detect needed improvements. This is your firemen coming out and inspecting and that kind of thing. Under policies and procedures, we also have records retention, provides defense against lawsuits and government investigations. ISO 15489-1, Information and Documentation Records Management. That's the international standard. So a record retention policy should include things like what type of records exist, and what does it cost to maintain these records, how should the records be preserved, what department should retain the records, how are the files to be organized, who should have access, and what purpose is served in retention. Also, how long should the records be retained? General standards for retention is the statute of limitations for lawsuits relating to the documents. So contracts under Universal Commercial Code have a 4-year limitation, income tax records 6. Periodic destruction of record is tied to the statutory requirements. So characteristics of a best-in-class records retention policy: you got ease of access in a workable system, required authorization, organization, so all related materials can be cross-referenced, establishing of time and retention, and process overriding periodic destruction. So here's PACCAR's records retention policy off of our internal website. And you'll see this is for procurement, and there's a number of them for procurement here. Purchasing related, product related, and then you've got not product related, customs, logistics records, shipping and receiving, and it'll tell you, you know, how many years you got to keep them. And you'll see that they're all a little bit different. So most of our stuff is 7 to 8 years. But on these product stuff, it could be up to 30 years. And then supplier and subcontractor safety. Audit and review. So the buyer cannot eliminate liability with a contract clause. So check suppliers and subcontractors' safety history. So OSHA requires records of workplace injuries be kept, and best-in-class companies will have safety goals, which are measured by things like the following: all injury incident rate. This kind of gives you the formula for how it's figured. Lost workday injury rate. And this is another formula, also called days away, restricted, or transferred, which is DART. It's just lost injury work rate. Here is a website, if you want to know more about how these things are figured, from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. And they go into a lot on how you do this stuff. Industry data. And you can look at that on your own leisure. So training. Many companies require that suppliers and subcontractors to participate and keep records of training. Can be done over the internet. OSHA will also require you to keep records of training. Organizations should review requirements and best practices in their industry. Requirements, got to meet or exceed all industry-specific requirements for health and safety. Best practice organizations should solicit best practices in their industry. And there's various websites dedicated to promoting and disseminating that kind of information. OSHA in the UK, Health and Safety Executive offers such sites. Storage requirements, systems should be established for the storage and maintenance of the documents, and document and dissemination policies and procedures should be made easily accessible to all stakeholders. And the organization's performance relative to the policy should also be documented. Customer-driven requirements. So customers in the consumer products and food industry have made supply chain safety a very important factor to the company, well, for obvious reasons. And newsworthy incidents of fire, earthquakes, damage, etc. at your suppliers can impair your brand image. Nike found this out when one of the factories that they made their apparel in Bangladesh was busy blocking all the fire exits, and the place burned down and killed a bunch of people. It wasn't a Nike company, but it was a Nike supplier, and Nike took a big hit for it. All right, so today in a global environment, safety and health issues not only apply to safety of the work environment, employees and supplier personnel, but also apply to what else? Safety and health issues. Intellectual property rights? I don't think so. Product regulations, maybe. Environmental hazards, certainly. Ethical conduct in foreign countries, possibly. I think C there is the answer I like best. Oh, B. Product regulations. Health and safety laws and drugs cover product regulations, chemicals, and other materials by ensuring the products sold to the public do not contain harmful elements. Okay. C, you're incorrect because they have their own sets and laws of regulation. So environmental hazard has its own regulations. All right. And then individuals or corporations in the U.S. may be held liable for injuries to persons injured while on a plant tour under which of these laws? Criminal law, Occupational Safe and Healthy Act, personal liability, organizational liability. So if you're out giving a tour and the person you're giving the tour to gets injured, I think it's personal liability because you messed up. Yep, C, personal liability. May be held legally responsible for safety violations. All right, let's look at some summary. Ensuring that an organization complied with U.S. law usually meant the organization would be covered in other parts of the world. With fast-paced global changes, such as the growth and power and influence of the European Union, this is no longer the case. So you really have to investigate the other countries' laws. In the United States, workplace safety is covered by the OSHA Act from 1970. Organizations should develop safety policies and procedures that not only ensure compliance with laws, but have as their goal the best available tools and systems for ensuring employee safety. And the restriction of hazardous substances in an EU directive, the purpose of which is to place restrictions on the use of certain hazardous substances in the electrical and electronic equipment. Safety data sheets, or SDSs, which changed from material safety data sheets in 2012, must be on file for toxic materials, a category that includes items ranging from toner for copy machines to cleaning solvents suitable for households. So you got to have these SDSs posted somewhere where people can find them. The regulation, evaluation, authorization, and restriction of chemicals, REACH, is an EU regulation on chemicals and their safe use. And that is that for that section. And now we need to go and find some questions. So you want to go to L4. And we've got how many questions here? Oh, we only got 5, so you can do all 5. And the answers are found in the answer file. Go find L4 again. And you want answers to practice questions. Tomorrow, I'll cover L5. Thanks for your time.